The sun filtered gently through the curtains, casting soft beams of golden light onto the warm, wooden floors of the living room. It was a peaceful morning in the quiet neighborhood, where the air was crisp and still, the sounds of distant birdsong filling the otherwise tranquil atmosphere. The day felt as if it had been untouched by time. A perfect, unhurried moment in a world that often moved too fast. In one corner of the yard, the bright sun warmed the grass, making the green blades shimmer as if they had been dusted with gold. Emily, a small girl of 5, sat cross-legged on the lawn, her golden hair shining like a halo in the sunlight. Her big, round eyes, a clear blue that mirrored the endless sky above her, were wide and alert, though not with the playful spark that once filled them. The innocence of childhood had dimmed a little in her eyes, replaced with a quiet, distant gaze. Still, there was a softness in her expression, a look of contemplation. As if she was noticing things most people would overlook. Emily's delicate fingers traced the patterns of the grass as she sat there, lost in her own world. Her small body, clothed in a soft pink dress, was still and peaceful, but there was a deep sadness that lingered around her, one that only those who truly understood her could feel. This was not the energetic, chatty Emily who had once run through this yard, laughing as she played with her friends. This was a different Emily, quieter, more reserved, a shadow of the girl she used to be. Sitting beside her, with his large, sturdy frame and a coat of black and tan fur, was Germ, her ever-loyal German shepherd. The dog sat calmly, his intelligent brown eyes never straying too far from Emily, watching her with a protective, almost affectionate gaze. Germ was not just a pet to Emily, he was her companion, her protector, and most importantly, her emotional support after a tragedy had forever altered her life. Germ was more than just a dog. He was Emily's anchor in a world that had become too overwhelming, too frightening. Emily had been a lively and curious child before the event, always quick to smile, to ask questions, to explore her world with joy. But after the incident, after the attempted kidnapping that had stolen her sense of security, everything changed. Emily stopped speaking. The bubbly, social little girl became a silent observer, someone who withdrew into herself, unable to trust the world around her. Her parents, devastated by what had happened, had sought help, trying everything from therapy to comfort in the form of stuffed animals and toys. But nothing seemed to ease her pain or help her find her voice again. Then, they brought Germ into their home, a dog trained to help children like Emily who had suffered trauma. Germ was patient and gentle with her, never rushing her or demanding anything. He was just there, always by her side, offering the silent comfort of his presence. Over time, Emily had slowly begun to rely on him, her bond with the dog growing deeper with each passing day. Now, on this quiet morning, Emily sat in the yard with Germ, her small hand resting on the dog's soft fur. There was something calming about the way he sat beside her, his body alert yet relaxed, his loyalty undeniable. Whenever Emily needed him, Germ was always there. his gentle warmth a steady comfort to her in a world that had become so uncertain. As the sunlight played on the leaves, casting dancing shadows across the ground, Emily's mind wandered, though her lips remained silent. Her eyes spoke volumes. There were still moments when the memories of what had happened flooded her. Moments when the world seemed too large and too loud. But in those moments, Germ was always there to anchor her. His presence a quiet reminder that she wasn't alone. Emily reached out, her small fingers brushing against the dog's ears. Germ looked at her, his head tilting slightly to the side, as if he understood the unspoken language between them. He gave a small, reassuring wag of his tail. His way of saying, "I'm here, I'll always be here." The bond between them was undeniable. Germ had become the bridge to the world for Emily. The one thing that she trusted fully. When she felt too overwhelmed, too scared to leave the safety of her home, Germ was there to walk beside her, to lead her forward, even if it was just a few steps at a time. Sometimes, when she sat like this, deep in thought, she would think about what her life used to be like. She remembered the laughter that had filled their house, the games she used to play with her friends, the way her parents would tuck her in at night and kiss her goodnight. But now, those memories felt like distant echoes, too far removed from the quiet, reserved child she had become. There were moments when Emily wondered if things would ever go back to the way they were. Would she ever be able to speak again? To share her thoughts and feelings like she used to? Would she ever find the courage to walk through the world with her head held high, without the fear that always seemed to follow her? The questions lingered in her heart, unanswered and heavy. But as she sat in the yard, with Germ by her side, a sense of peace settled over her. The world outside might have been full of noise and chaos. But in this moment, in this quiet corner of the world, Emily found solace. Germ, with his calm presence and unwavering loyalty, had become her constant, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there was still love and comfort to be found. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily allowed herself to relax, her shoulders lowering as the weight of her thoughts eased. She rested her head against Germ's soft fur, closing her eyes for a moment. The warmth of the sun and the gentle rustling of the leaves filled her senses. And for just a little while, she allowed herself to simply be. It wasn't much. It wasn't the return of the lively, talkative girl she once was. But it was something. It was progress, one small step at a time. And in that quiet, peaceful morning, surrounded by the love of her family and the unwavering loyalty of Germ, Emily found a fleeting sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward, a way to heal, to regain her voice, and to trust the world once more. And as long as Germ was by her side, Emily knew she would have the strength to take that first step. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm orange glow over the quiet suburban neighborhood. The air was still, the kind of peaceful calm that filled the late afternoon with an almost serene hush. The houses were quiet, the sounds of everyday life fading into the background. It was a perfect evening for playing outside. And Emily, her golden hair glowing in the sunlight, was lost in her world of make-believe as she wandered the yard. Germ, her ever-watchful German shepherd, was by her side, his eyes scanning the surroundings as he always did. Though Emily had grown more quiet over the months, she still loved the simple joys of playing outdoors. She spent her time running in circles, pretending to chase invisible creatures or talking to the flowers and trees in her own way. Her small hands would sometimes pat the ground or pull up a blade of grass, as if deep in conversation with the world around her. But today, she didn't notice the figure across the street. Across the road, on the other side of the quiet neighborhood, a man stood watching. His eyes were fixed on Emily, unblinking, as if studying her every move. He was not a person from the neighborhood, and though he tried to appear casual, there was something off about his stance, something unsettling about his presence. His hands were shoved deep into the pockets of his jacket, and his face held an unsettling, almost predatory smile. This was a man with a past, one that wasn't easily forgotten by those who had been keeping track. He had been involved in several child abduction cases in the past. Though he had never been caught, his reputation was well known to the authorities. But he had always managed to slip through the cracks. There wasn't enough concrete evidence to make an arrest, but those who knew of his history kept a wary eye out for him. And now, he was standing just across the street from Emily's house, quietly observing, as Emily continued to play, completely unaware of the danger nearby. Germ, her loyal protector, began to sense that something was wrong. The dog's ears twitched as his sharp eyes zeroed in on the man. His body grew tense, his muscles tightening as the stranger's presence registered in his instincts. Germ's first reaction was to move closer to Emily, his protective instincts kicking in. The dog slowly and subtly maneuvered himself between Emily and the stranger, his eyes never leaving the man across the road. Emily, still lost in her game, didn't seem to notice Germ's change in behavior. The dog was always close to her, but now there was something different about his posture. His head was slightly lowered, his tail stiff behind him. He was watching, waiting, as if the world around him had become dangerous. Emily's small fingers wrapped tightly around the leash that connected her to Germ. Though she hadn't seen the man yet, something in the air had shifted, and she sensed the change in Germ's demeanor. Her grip tightened on the leash, the dog's presence bringing her comfort. The man, noticing Germ's shift, took a step forward. He smiled, though the smile was tight and cold, as though rehearsed. He began to walk slowly toward Emily, his eyes gleaming with a strange mixture of friendliness and something darker. His pace was casual, almost too calm, but there was an unmistakable intent behind his every movement. "Hey there," the man called out as he got closer, his voice smooth but with an underlying tension. "You know, I have some really cute puppies. Would you like to see them?" His words were honeyed, the kind of offer that might seem harmless to a child who was eager to make a new friend. "They're soft and playful, just like Germ here." But Emily didn't respond. She remained silent, her small body frozen in place as the man approached. Her wide eyes, usually filled with curiosity, now seemed distant, clouded by something else, perhaps a growing sense of unease. An instinctive wariness that she couldn't explain. Her grip on Germ's leash tightened even further. The dog, sensing the discomfort in his young companion, shifted slightly, standing closer to her side. His body was now fully positioned between Emily and the man, his large form acting as both a shield and a warning. The man, undeterred by Emily's silence, crouched down to her level, his smile never faltering. "I promise. They're friendly," he said in a coaxing voice. His tone too sweet, too practiced. He leaned in closer, his eyes glinting with a hint of impatience as he tried to get Emily to engage with him. "Would you like to come see them? They're just across the street. You'll love them, I know you will." But Emily didn't say a word. She stood still, her eyes wide, locked on the man but filled with a quiet defiance. Her mind raced, processing the strange sense of danger she felt but couldn't fully understand. Still, there was no question in her mind. Germ was here. And he was protecting her. She trusted him, trusted the way his presence made her feel safe. Without speaking, without uttering a single word, Emily squeezed the leash again. The silent message clear. "Don't come any closer." Germ, aware of the rising tension, gave a low growl, soft, yet firm. The sound was deep in his chest. A growl of warning that resonated through the air. It was the kind of growl that spoke of loyalty and protection. A clear statement to anyone who might threaten his companion. The man hesitated for a brief moment, his smile faltering, but he quickly recovered, though his eyes now looked darker, sharper. He took another small step forward, trying to close the distance. "I don't bite," he said with a forced chuckle. But the words felt hollow, like they were meant to lull Emily into a sense of ease. Yet Emily remained unmoving, her face set in a quiet, determined expression. She didn't trust him, and she didn't trust his words. She could feel something in the air, a palpable danger that made her stomach twist. Germ's growl grew louder, a clear sign that he wasn't going to back down. The dog's body was now taut with tension, every muscle coiled and ready. He was warning the man, telling him that any further step would not be tolerated. The man stopped, his eyes narrowing as he met the dog's fierce gaze. For a moment, there was a tense silence. The world seemed to pause, the air thick with an unspoken standoff between the man and the dog. Finally, the man, realizing that he wasn't going to win this battle, gave a sharp sigh, his lips curled in a final, twisted smile as he slowly turned and began to walk away. "Fine, little girl," he muttered under his breath, almost inaudibly, as he walked back across the street, his figure receding into the distance. Once he was out of sight, Emily exhaled a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Her body, still tense, slowly began to relax, and she reached down to gently stroke Germ's fur. The dog, sensing the shift, wagged his tail softly, the warning growl fading away. Emily didn't speak, but the connection between them was as clear as ever. Germ had protected her, just as he always would. She could feel his steady heartbeat beside hers. A silent promise that he would always keep her safe. Emily didn't need words. She only needed Germ. And with him by her side, She knew that no matter what dangers might lurk in the shadows, she was never truly alone. The air was still, thick with tension, as the man, having realized Emily's silent defiance, took another step forward. His patience was wearing thin, and his smile twisted into something darker as he slowly moved closer. He had thought his charm would work, that the little girl would be drawn in by his promises of cute puppies and new adventures. But her silence only fueled his impatience. There was no time for games now. The man's eyes flickered to the van parked a few yards away. The doors of the vehicle just slightly ajar. He knew what he had to do. The girl was frightened. Yes, but she was also alone. He had no doubt that once he had her, no one would be able to stop him. He stepped closer, his movements slow but deliberate. He reached out, his hand brushing against Emily's arm. "Come on, sweetie, don't be scared," he coaxed, his voice deceptively gentle. "I promise. It'll be fun. You'll like the puppies. Just come with me, and we'll be there in no time." He tugged at her arm lightly, guiding her toward the van. But Emily didn't move. Her face, still frozen in her quiet resolve, was locked onto the man's hand with unwavering focus. She squeezed the leash in her hand tighter, her grip a silent plea for help, a plea that only Germ could understand. And Germ understood. Oh, he understood all too well. The dog, who had been standing by Emily's side with quiet vigilance, now reacted with a sudden, explosive burst of motion. His body tensed, muscles coiled like springs, and before the man could take another step toward Emily, Germ lunged, his teeth bared, his massive form moving with a speed and precision that only a trained protector could achieve. With a powerful leap, Germ tackled the man to the ground. The sound of the impact was deafening, a thud that echoed in the stillness of the afternoon air. The man let out a startled grunt as the full weight of the dog slammed into him, knocking him off balance and sending him sprawling onto the grass. Germ didn't stop there. The dog's instincts were sharp, his loyalty to Emily stronger than any force of nature. As the man flailed under his weight, Germ pinned him to the ground with terrifying strength. His powerful jaws were mere inches from the man's throat, and the growl that emanated from the dog's chest was so low, so threatening, that it seemed to vibrate through the air like a warning. "Stay down," Germ's stance seemed to say, his eyes blazing with a fierce intensity, his muscles taut with readiness. The growl reverberated in the man's ears, a primal sound that carried no mercy. The man's eyes widened in fear, and he froze, his body rigid under the dog's forceful grip. For a moment, the only sounds were the heavy breathing of the man and the low, continuous growl coming from Germ. Emily, still standing a few steps away, watched the scene unfold in silent awe. The dog, her protector, had reacted faster than she could comprehend, instinctively defending her from a danger she couldn't yet understand fully. Her heart pounded in her chest. But she didn't move. She simply stood there, gripping Germ's leash tightly, trusting him completely. The man, now completely immobilized by the weight of the dog, glared at Germ, his face flushed with a mixture of rage and fear. He tried to twist and squirm beneath the dog. But it was futile. Germ's eyes never left him, eyes that burned with a steady, unwavering focus. The dog's massive frame held the man down with unyielding power. And the man knew, deep down, that there was no way out. But even with the danger temporarily neutralized, the man's mind raced. He could see that he wasn't going to win this battle of strength. There was no point in fighting back anymore. Not with Germ's teeth so close. Not with the dog's every muscle prepared to strike if necessary. Instead, the man resorted to trying to reason his way out. "Easy, boy, easy," the man spat, his voice shaky but attempting to sound calm. "I wasn't going to hurt her. Just let me go, and we'll forget this whole thing." But Germ didn't move. He wasn't listening to the man's empty promises or his words of manipulation. The dog was watching him with unwavering suspicion, his instincts guiding every motion. There was no room for negotiation, no mercy in Germ's eyes. The dog knew exactly what this man had intended for Emily, and there would be no second chances. Emily, who had been watching the encounter with a quiet intensity, finally stepped forward, her small feet barely making a sound on the grass. She stood a few steps away from Germ, her grip on the leash still tight, her wide eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and understanding. She didn't need to say anything. She knew that Germ had everything under control. The man, realizing that no amount of pleading would get him out of this situation, let out a deep sigh of frustration. He looked at Emily, and for a moment, there was a flicker of something dark in his gaze, something that didn't belong. But it disappeared as quickly as it had come, replaced by a silent resentment toward the dog who had ruined his plans. He couldn't hide the look of defeat in his eyes. Germ, still holding the man firmly on the ground, did not back off. His jaws were now positioned just inches from the man's throat, his teeth sharp and deadly. But the dog made no move to attack. He was waiting for the right moment, for the right sign. The man was no longer a threat. His own fear had disarmed him. And he was now fully at Germ's mercy. Seconds passed. Minutes seemed to stretch on. But the tension was palpable. Finally, the sound of distant sirens could be heard. Faint but growing louder. Someone had noticed the commotion. The man, hearing the approaching sirens, let out a final, defeated grunt. He knew his time had run out. Jamal, one of the neighborhood's watchful residents, was quick to respond. He arrived just as the sirens did, rushing toward Emily and Germ with a mixture of relief and concern. He knew the danger was over, but he could still feel the adrenaline rushing through his veins. When he saw the man pinned on the ground by Germ, Jamal knew exactly what had happened. The dog had saved Emily from a dangerous predator. The authorities soon arrived, taking the man into custody, his fate now sealed by his own actions. As they led him away, Germ relaxed, his growl softening into a low hum of satisfaction. As if to say, "Job well done." He turned to Emily, his eyes gentle now, as if to reassure her that everything was going to be okay. Emily, still gripping the leash tightly, allowed herself to relax for the first time in what felt like forever. Her protector, her constant companion, had kept her safe once again. The bond between them, forged in the heat of danger and strengthened by their shared silence, was unbreakable. As the police car pulled away, Emily looked down at Germ, her face softening into a quiet smile. She didn't need to speak. She didn't need to say anything at all. Germ knew what she felt. And she knew she would always be safe as long as he was by her side. The sound of sirens filled the air, growing louder with each passing second until the police cars screeched to a halt in front of Emily's house. The chaos of the moment seemed to subside as officers quickly jumped out of the vehicles, their eyes scanning the surroundings. They had been alerted by one of the neighbors who had witnessed the strange encounter between Emily, the man, and Germ. The officers were well trained, their bodies moving swiftly as they approached the scene. They had no doubt that something was wrong. When they saw the man lying on the ground with Germ still firmly keeping him in place, it became immediately clear that the situation had been handled. Germ had done his job and then some. The officers moved toward the man, their hands going to their holsters in readiness. But there was no need for further force. The would-be kidnapper, now defeated and immobilized by the dog, offered no resistance as they took him into custody. The danger had passed. However, as the police went about securing the area and questioning bystanders, they noticed something odd. Emily, the little girl who had been the target of the man's sinister intentions, had not said a word. She stood in the yard, clutching the leash of her dog, her eyes distant and unreadable. It was as if she had retreated into herself. Despite the fact that the danger was over, the officers exchanged concerned glances. It wasn't uncommon for children to be in shock after traumatic events. But Emily's silence struck them as more than that. She was staring blankly at the scene, her body still and unmoving. Despite the flurry of activity around her, something about her expression made them pause. The usual signs of relief or distress didn't show. Instead, there was only a quiet stillness, a silence that felt out of place. As the officers began to speak to witnesses and assess the situation, one of them, a seasoned officer named Detective Harris, took a step closer to Emily. He had dealt with many cases of trauma in children before, and he knew better than to force a response. Instead, he knelt down to her level, trying to connect with her through his calm presence. "Hey there," he said gently, his voice soft. "Are you okay? Do you want to tell me what happened?" But Emily didn't answer. She just stood there, her small fingers still wrapped tightly around Germ's leash. Her wide eyes, usually full of curiosity and wonder, were now clouded with something else, something deeper that even the most experienced officer couldn't quite place. Emily wasn't speaking, wasn't moving, but the look in her eyes said enough. She wasn't lost in fear. But there was something else going on. Something that made her retreat further into herself. It was in this moment of uncertainty that Germ, the dog who had so fiercely protected Emily, did something unexpected. He had been standing by her side the entire time, watching over her with vigilance. But now, sensing the shift in the air, he moved closer to Emily. With a slow, deliberate step, Germ approached her, his large form gentle despite the strength it possessed. The dog lowered his head, looking up at Emily with eyes that were full of empathy and understanding. Then, in a soft, unexpected gesture, Germ licked Emily's hand. His warm, wet tongue brushed against her fingers. His soft touch a silent reassurance that, despite the chaos around them, everything was okay. It was a small act, but it spoke volumes. Germ was there, as he always had been, reminding Emily that she wasn't alone, that he would protect her no matter what. The officers, watching from a distance, exchanged looks of surprise. The bond between Emily and her dog was evident now. More than ever, it was clear that Germ wasn't just an animal to Emily. He was her protector, her guide, the one thing that had remained constant in a world that had become unpredictable and frightening. Emily's eyes flickered, and for the first time since the commotion began, she seemed to soften. There was a shift in her expression, a subtle change that didn't go unnoticed. She looked down at Germ, and for the first time in what seemed like forever, the tiniest smile tugged at her lips. Emily's fingers, still clutching the leash, relaxed just a bit, her hand now resting gently on Germ's head. She looked into the dog's eyes, her gaze filled with gratitude. And then, in the quietest voice imaginable, she spoke. "Thank you, Germ," she said, the words almost a whisper. But they were there, clear and true. It was the first time Emily had spoken in months. The words seemed to echo in the air. And for a moment, everything else faded away. The sirens, the officers, the man who had been taken into custody, they all seemed distant, insignificant compared to this small, fragile moment. Emily had found her voice again. And with it, she had found a piece of herself that had been lost for so long. Germ, sensing the weight of Emily's words, responded in the only way he knew how, by leaning gently into her, offering his silent comfort and reassurance. The dog's tail wagged slowly, his body pressing closer to her as if to say, "You're safe now. I'm here, always." Detective Harris, who had been watching the scene unfold, couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the connection between Emily and her dog. He had seen children recover from trauma in many ways. But this was different. This was the moment when Emily had truly begun to heal. It wasn't a grand gesture or a sudden breakthrough. It was a quiet, tender moment of connection, a simple thank you, spoken from a heart that had endured so much. The officers, now understanding the gravity of the situation, gave Emily and Germ space. They didn't force her to speak or to relive the trauma she had experienced. They knew that sometimes, healing didn't come from words, but from the silent understanding between a child and her protector. They had done their job. The kidnapper had been caught, and the danger had passed. But now, it was up to Emily to find her way back to herself, and she was starting that journey, one small step at a time, with Germ by her side. As the scene settled down, the sun slowly sank lower in the sky, painting the world with shades of pink and gold. Emily, still standing by Germ, seemed calmer, more grounded, as if the weight of the world had been lifted from her shoulders. She had spoken. She had thanked Germ. and in doing so, she had taken her first step toward healing. Germ, her constant companion, remained by her side, ever watchful, ever loving. Emily didn't need words to understand what Germ's presence meant. She knew, and as the evening shadows grew longer, the bond between them felt stronger than ever. The world outside might have been chaotic, but in this moment, in this small corner of the world, Emily had found peace again, thanks to the quiet strength of her loyal protector. The courtroom was tense as the trial began. The man, who had been arrested after his failed attempt to kidnap Emily, stood in front of the judge, his expression cold and defiant. His past, filled with a history of similar crimes, had finally caught up to him. Despite his attempts to blend in with the neighborhood, he could no longer hide the darkness that followed him. He was facing serious charges now, charges that could change the course of his life forever. The courtroom was filled with murmurs as witnesses took the stand, each recounting the chilling events that had unfolded in the quiet neighborhood. Neighbors, local residents who had been on alert after seeing the man lurking near Emily's house, testified to the fact that they had seen him standing across the street. Observing her, they spoke about the tension in the air, about how something didn't feel right. But no one had expected the encounter to escalate as it did. Then came the most important testimony of all. The officer who had been first on the scene after the incident took the stand, describing how he had arrived to find Germ, the German shepherd, holding the man down with incredible force. The officer spoke of the dog's protective stance, his unwavering determination to keep Emily safe. It was clear that the dog wasn't just acting out of instinct. The officer said, it was as if he knew exactly what was happening, and he wasn't going to let this man get anywhere near Emily. He saved her. As the officer spoke, Emily's mother, Sarah, sat in the front row, her hand clasped tightly in her lap. She had lived through the nightmare of her daughter's silence after the kidnapping attempt. And now, watching the pieces of the puzzle fall into place, she couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. She had seen the way Germ had changed Emily's life, how the dog had been her anchor, her protector, in the darkest of times. And now, the truth was being laid out in front of everyone. Germ had not only saved her daughter, but had also helped her find her way back to herself. The courtroom fell silent as the defense tried to argue that the man hadn't meant any harm, that perhaps there had been a misunderstanding. But the evidence was overwhelming. There were the testimonies of the neighbors, the police officer's account, and the irrefutable fact that Germ had acted with remarkable intelligence and instinct to protect Emily. The man's own silence spoke volumes. He had nothing left to say in his defense. As the trial progressed, Sarah couldn't help but think back to the days following the incident. Emily had been a different child then, silent, withdrawn, consumed by fear. She remembered the long, sleepless nights, the worry that she might never hear her daughter's voice again. She had seen the changes in Emily, but Germ had been the one constant, the one thing that seemed to reach through the walls of her daughter's silence. The dog had never judged, never pushed Emily to speak. He had simply been there, a steady presence at her side. offering the kind of love and protection only an animal could provide. Over time, Sarah had noticed the subtle shifts in Emily's behavior. The way her small fingers would curl into Germ's fur when she felt scared. The way her shoulders would relax when she looked into his eyes. And then, one day, Sarah heard it, the softest of whispers, almost imperceptible. "Thank you, Germ." It was the first time Emily had spoken in months. And it was as if the floodgates had opened. Emily had found her voice again. Thanks to the unwavering support of her loyal companion. Emily's progress had been slow but steady. With Germ by her side, she began to trust the world around her again. Piece by piece, her laughter returned, soft and shy at first, but gradually growing in strength. She was still quiet, still reserved, but the spark of the old Emily was slowly returning, and with it, the courage to face her fears. During the trial, as the final statements were made, Emily's story had become one of strength. She wasn't just the victim of a terrible event. She was now a young girl who had found the courage to rise above her trauma. And in the process, she had become the hero of her own story. Thanks to Germ's love and protection. The courtroom, once filled with tension, now held a sense of closure. And the truth was clear. Emily had overcome the darkness. And Germ had been her guiding light. As the trial ended, and the verdict was read, guilty, the room filled with a collective sense of relief. The man was going to be held accountable for his actions. And Emily could finally start to heal without the constant fear that haunted her every day. Sarah felt a wave of gratitude wash over her as she looked at her daughter, who, despite the darkness she had faced, had emerged stronger and more resilient than ever before. After the trial, the community rallied around Emily and Germ, honoring the dog who had become a symbol of hope and courage. They were both heroes now, not only for Emily's safety but for the love and strength they had shown in the face of adversity. Germ had been more than just a pet. He had been a lifeline. A constant reminder that, even in the darkest of times, there was still light. For Emily, the healing process was just beginning. The road ahead would be long. But with Germ by her side, she knew she would face whatever came next. The bond between them had become something unbreakable. A connection that transcended words and fear. It was a bond that would carry her through the hardest times, and a reminder that sometimes the greatest heroes come in the form of four-legged companions. The story of Emily and Germ was a testament to the power of unconditional love, trust, and the unspoken strength that animals bring into our lives. It was a reminder that, in the face of danger and trauma, the right companion could be the difference between fear and healing. And as Emily looked at Germ, her eyes filled with gratitude and love. She knew that with him by her side, she could conquer anything that life threw her way. In the end, it wasn't just the trial or the man who had been held accountable. It was the power of love, the strength of a bond between a child and her dog, that truly saved the day. And Emily's journey, her return to herself, was just the beginning of a new chapter. One where she could finally find peace, knowing that she was loved, protected, and never truly alone.
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please comment 1. And if you didn't, just hit like. See you in the next videos.